the expression, the word itself, it's seismic. It could cause, I mean, obviously serious issues, not only with the individual going home, but the ripple effects will impact family members, loved ones. No one wants to hear that particular word, but the reality is several organizations have been sending home workers recently. We're looking at just a few here. I'll just mention a few: TCL, TSTT, Unilever, WASA, just to name a few. I want to welcome Managing Director of the Elle Daniel Associates, a law firm there in Port of Spain. Their MD joins us, Shaquilla Daniel. She's to the bottom of the Zoom screen. Good morning, Ms. Daniel.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. And I also want to introduce this morning from the association, your Industrial Relations Officer, Allena Alleyne. Good morning, Ms. Alleyne.
Good morning. Good morning.
Morning. As I mentioned in my intro, just the sound and the mention of retrenchment, you know, the impact is seismic. People, yes. Obviously, it's one that, it's a heartbreaker. It's one that puts you in a kind of tailspin. And obviously, there are those who would have been able to work it out and found that particular resilience and are able to press on. And there are those who it really, they're still dealing with the impact of it. And we saw plenty of that happening during the COVID. But now we're looking at industrial relations and the fact that a couple of companies, well, I just mentioned, TCL, the TSTT's, the Unilevers, the WASAs, sending home workers. I want to find out from you ladies. Let me start with the MD. When you look at it from the legal standpoint, do these entities, based on what's happening, based on the economic climate, do they stand on solid ground? What's the correct way, or is there any correct way at all to go about a retrenchment exercise? Good morning. Let me start with the MD. That question is for you, Ms. Daniel.
Sure, okay. Most certainly there is. And in fact, recently we would have highlighted this on one of our webinars. There is always a manner in which things ought to be done. Certain legislation, in fact, that govern the same. And it is very important for employers to recognize their responsibility in relation to this and acquaint themselves so that the manner in which they go about it isn't ultra-virus law and doesn't infringe on the rights of the employees.
So again, it's a difficult decision, that's without a doubt. But you're saying there is a correct way to go about it. Some decisions, obviously, I would imagine for some companies, they will have their particular reasons. What particular grounds you think it's at least in your line of practice, your years of work, what has been the grounds, at least a common thread with the grounds for retrenchment by some of these major companies? What have you observed over the years?
So in terms of, so we have Ms. Alleyne with us, the expert really in industrial relations and law with the same, but generally all employment is governed by contractual arrangements, right? And it is important for employers to recognize just what, because you asked specifically what grounds, and perhaps she can give us some examples of such and what is the role and function really in the manner in which the employer is supposed to go about the process, because it is a process.
Of course, by all means, Ms. Alleyne, we stand by for your commentary. We're listening. Yeah, go right ahead. We're listening.
Go ahead, Ms. Alleyne.
Yes.
Yes, good morning again.
Yes.
Yes, so this morning's topic is, as you said, is a very serious topic because retrenchment is a very traumatic and very emotional thing or event that would happen. Now, in many cases, or in some cases, retrenchment is a inevitable process that needs to take place, a restructuring exercise, as they would say. And there are many factors that would happen that would encourage or have the employer lean towards making the decision to retrench workers, whether it is the company is seeing financial woes, whether it is the issue of certain services that was offered in the past, it's outdated and they no longer need a certain amount of employees. But, you know, what we saw during the pandemic, it really did force employers' hands to send people home, unfortunately. Now, the thing is, there are laws guided that are written to guide employers in terms of what is the right process, you know, following the first in, last out method. What sometimes tends to bring retrenchment very traumatic is where the employers don't do it the correct way. Now, as far as the Retrenchment Severance Benefit Act goes, it's very specific in terms of what an employer is supposed to do with regards to retrenching workers. And what happens is that sometimes employers, with their probably their quest to save their business, they don't follow the steps, or they may start to follow the steps and then they start skipping, you know, a certain process, and this is where the problem comes in. Now, in regards to other areas of the law in which employers should also pay attention to would be the International Labour Organization conventions, and of course, good industrial relations principles and practices is also very important. Now, when you retrench one person, it doesn't mean that you're affecting one person. That one person, you know, tend to sometimes be the breadwinner of the family, and so sometimes with that one person being retrenched, 6 or probably 7 persons are being affected as well.
Trickle-down effect, for sure. I want to find out, because you mentioned adhering to these certain rules to guide the retrenchment process. If indeed the employer does not follow these said rules, does the retrenched employee have, well, you know, they can come to you or they can go to someone to seek legal redress? I mean, we operate literally obliquely opposite the industrial court. Is the industrial court, do you have a date with the industrial court to pull up your employer if they don't follow the rules?
Yes, well, yes, that employee can visit a trade union of their choice if they are not under a bargaining unit or under a collective agreement. They can visit any trade union of their choice, who will then pursue the matter on their behalf. However, there is a statutory time frame for an employee to report their matter, which is 6 months. So, you know, there are avenues. I would advise employees to seek out a trade union, or you can go to the Ministry of Labor to get further advice on how you can seek redress if you have been retrenched, or sometimes you would say it is actually a termination under the guise of retrenchment or under the guise of redundancy.
You know, you made an interesting point, and I guess you could both could add in terms of the answer, because the reality is, you said changing technologies. Well, you didn't really mention technologies, but sometimes we see where there is a situation, human beings would have been doing a task, and now it's replaced by a machine, it's replaced by technology. If the writing is on the wall, you as an employee, you're recognizing what's going on. The writing is on the wall. You realize that your particular role and function will indeed become redundant. Do you now, as we say in local terms, take front before front take you, as in you start to apply one time and don't just wait until that day comes where they tell you, here we're going on, we have no use for your particular role and function anymore? What's your advice when people recognize that change is coming? You recognize the writing on the wall and things are going to, as they say, hit the fan soon?
But what I'd first say is that the employer has an obligation to inform his or her employees that business is not doing well and there's a possibility that their services done properly. But of course, I would advise employees as well to always tap into your inner resources and to make yourself more diverse and viable for probably another place of employment or even starting your own business. Because I would reiterate that retrenchment really does impact the socio-economic of the economy. It is a decline. And you find persons also going into depression. During a pandemic, you would testify that suicide rates went up, domestic violence went up, substance abuse went up. And sometimes when you look at the root of those issues, you would find that a lot of persons would have lost their jobs during the pandemic. They were retrenched.
Yeah.
And a lot of persons would have had a significant amount of years with a company where they have self-actualized in that company. They have reached their peak. They have given so much to that company, and to lose it, to have that taken away from them, you have cut off their lifeline.
Yeah, I feel a part of you is lost. It's beyond just the economics, it's beyond the money, it's your sense of purpose is lost. You know what? I mean, this is such an important discussion. I want to thank you, Ms. Alleyne, for coming in. I probably want to give Ms. Daniel just the closing remarks. We have about just under a minute before we head to the break. Anything you want to add as we look to put a close, at least for now, because I'd love to have you all on again at some point so we could advance the conversation. But Ms. Daniel, you could take us out to the break with your closing remarks.
Cecily, but it was indeed a pleasure for us to be here as well. As a firm, we're encouraging conversations and discussions like these. It really helps citizens understand the role of law and the courts in assisting them with functioning in the society. As Ms. Alleyne would have highlighted, the topic we discussed this morning does have socioeconomic impact. And it is really important for the public at large to understand that they can use the law for their assistance and for their benefit and for their edification. The laws of the land are for us. We have a right to know it and a right to know our rights that it provides for us. So, we are soon out of time, but we certainly can. I hope that the information presented today would have been helpful, and we do a lot of outreach to assist members of the public with becoming better acquainted with the provisions available to them by virtue of the laws of the land.
Well said, and thank you so much, ladies, for coming on this morning. Of course, from the Elle Daniel Associates law firm, located right here in Port of Spain. Thank you so much for coming on this morning. Of course,